So I'm Eleanor, for those that don't know me, co-founder of Assured, which is the UK's only cyber insurance brokerage, but I'm still very much on the journalism side of things. I'm not sure if I'm the graveyard or the closing headliner. As a journalist, I want to put a spin on it, so I'm going to say I'm the closing headliner, but thank you very much for sticking around to the end today. I do want to apologise as well for relying quite heavily on my notes. My excuse is that I'm 8 months pregnant and my brain is like a marshmallow. So I do just forget everything at the moment. So I'm going to be using my notes a lot when I wouldn't normally do that. This talk stems from a research article that I wrote on the same topic. I interviewed 10, 11, maybe 12 professionals at great length to get the research for this. They're all senior leadership levels, so they were CEOs, CISOs, or founders. So the pinpoint today, the deep dive I am doing, is the effect of burnout on those in very senior positions. I will put the link up to the feature at the end, so if you do want to read the full article, please do so. Okay. I've picked this quote from the article, not to be sensationalist, although maybe a little bit, because I am a journalist after all, but because I think that it denotes the very rock bottom of where people can get to. The vulnerability and honesty that the professional showed me by telling me this story when I was interviewing them is quite incredible and admirable. For anyone who's ever thought perhaps that burnout isn't a big deal, I hope that this story proves otherwise and we can really see the severity of the situation. So first, let's look at what burnout actually is. Of course, like lots of things, burnout means different things to different people. The World Health Organization doesn't actually classify it as a medical condition. Instead, they call it an occupational phenomenon, or more specifically, in an extended form, a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been properly managed. Of the 3 dimensions that they list, I'm not sure if you can see those in the pink font. I'm sure that there's very few people in this room that don't resonate with at least one of those dimensions. One of the people I interviewed for this feature described it as an overinvestment in anything other than themselves, and I thought that that was really prolific. As part of this, I started to learn about something called ego depletion, which isn't what it sounds like it's going to be. It's not ego in the traditional sense of the word as you think it. It's a theory that willpower is connected to a limited energy, supply of mental energy. Once you run out of that energy, you're more likely to lose control, which then leads to burnout. It suggests that self-control draws upon conscious mental resources that, when taxed to exhaustion, leaves us without any control whatsoever. So, for example, if you're using all of your energy at work during the day, by the time you get home, you've run out of that energy, and then you're incapable of making healthy decisions. So, for example, eating healthily, maybe drinking to excess, having a short fuse, blowing up at your family. By showing self-control at work, that then can play havoc in your personal life. And I always think about that analogy that many psychiatrists use, where they have the bottle of Pepsi and they keep the lid on it all day at work, and they're shaking it all day long in the office. And then they get home and they have that safe space. They undo the cap on the bottle and it explodes. I think that's a bit what like this is. Quick bit of theory. This was a psychiatrist study, the Holmes and Ray stress scale. It's old, it's from 1967, but even then, when they studied the link between stressful life events and mental health impact, 9 of the 43 life events that they considered stress aggravators were work-related. That is a hell of a lot. And I would argue that situation's only got worse. Our work lives are more extreme, we're more connected, we have devices at home, we work remotely. It's a lot harder to switch off than I think it was back then. So why do some people get burnt out? I think the type of personality type that lends itself to senior leadership roles typically can also lend itself to burnout. That's obviously not for everyone. There are definitely many exceptions to that rule. But as a rule of thumb, they share similar traits. There's this thing called the Insight Discovery psychiatric tool. Lots of big corporations use it. My old company used it. It categorizes leaders into 4 different colors. Most leaders, again, just most, not everyone, but fall into the red category, which shows signs of being competitive, demanding, determined, strong-willed. And on the surface, these traits that you'd associate with vulnerability don't exist in that red category. But they do mean that quite often those people that are always going the extra mile, that are striving for more and more and more, will get burnt out. I spoke to one CEO and founder during this research. He was a serial entrepreneur as well. He was called Fred Shabastra. He was the founder of Finder, which is a fintech company. He told me that to be an entrepreneur, burnout is inevitable, and actually you have to lean on it. You have to lean into it. He says he sees it as a positive, as something that he uses to push himself harder. He also said he recognizes that theory isn't for everyone, and I would suggest that that's right. It certainly isn't, but it's definitely devil's advocate way of looking at burnout. The biggest theme that came out of all of these interviews was how lonely it is in those senior leadership roles. One reason, I think, for this is that CEOs or senior leaders don't allow themselves to be vulnerable. They worry that they'll lose the faith of their board, the people that they report into. They worry that they'll lose the faith of their staff, the people that report into them. And crucially, they then felt that they couldn't go home and be vulnerable in front of partners, husbands, wives, families, because they feared that they'd get the response, well, you need to stop doing that. You need to quit. As a consequence, loneliness strikes. Humans are a tribal species, and I think one of the biggest fears that humans have is just not belonging. And senior leaders keep quiet so as not to reject that rejection from their work tribe. It's a lonely job because you cannot share that sense of vulnerability. You don't want your team to lose faith in you. You don't want to be fired. You don't want to be seen as weak. Red flags. As is true of most illnesses, the earlier that you spot it, detect it, diagnose it, the greater the chance of prevention or remedy. Most of the leaders that I spoke to for this research describe themselves as totally unaware or in a fog about the severity of their burnout whilst they were actually in it. But some things, a list of things I've compiled to look out for in your own mental health, the red flags to spot, or that of your colleagues or your friends or your family, are things that seem to crop up time and time again in themes. Recurring illness or pain was one of the top ones. People either in chronic pain with no explanation for it, going to the doctors, couldn't find anything. Just recurring colds, coughs, just never feeling well. Fatigue. Behavior, excessive behaviors. That could be alcohol, it could be gambling, it could be partying, it could be risk-taking, medication, whether prescription or not. Anything that forms that behavior of excess is a red flag. And of course, depression. And then there's the one that kept rearing its ugly head in all of the interviews that I did, which is anger. It's an unfortunate irony and truth that when you need your brain the most, it's typically when it shuts down. During intense periods of stress, the brain shuts off the cognitive functions of the prefrontal cortex, which strengthens the emotional responses like anger. I've shared 3 direct quotes from 3 of my interviewees around their experiences with anger. And I found this one of the saddest parts of the research, I think. You can see that the effect it was having on the people around them. And in hindsight, they all said that they recognized how hard that they became to be around and the relationships that they either lost or almost lost as a consequence. And it comes back to that shaken Pepsi bottle analogy, I think. Motivation drivers come in two camps. There's fear, and then there's attraction. And I actually really did a deep dive on this because I found it so interesting when I was doing the research. So fear motivation triggers our fight or flight response as humans, which is a survival tactic, of course, that's deeply ingrained in us. It's a powerful tool, but it can only take us so far. So if you think about coming face to face with a lion in a jungle, fear will trigger you to run, but you can only run for so long before you burn out and then probably get eaten by the lion. And those primarily motivated by fear in a work sense. So the fear of not making enough money, the fear of not getting the next promotion, the fear of not being able to give your children the things you want to be able to give to them, will only serve you in the short term. These people are set to never feel that sense of achievement or purpose or accomplishment because the fear is always there. It's like a dark shadow looming over them. On the other hand, you've got motivation rooted in positive aspiration. The attraction part, and that's the longer term strategy. This will provide a healthier fulfillment, and striving and meeting goals and objectives that you set yourself give you that sense of achievement and sense of fulfillment. Before we move into the final part, which is going to be talking about solutions, I wanted to really lay out the severity of burnout. The consequences can be life-changing and actually perhaps even life-threatening. 30% of the people I interviewed for this article admitted that they had been suicidal at least one point in their lives because of their career. I've picked these 3 chilling quotes to share here, and I'm so thankful that they're still around to tell me their story. People consider burnout sometimes this like dirty little secret that it's something to be ashamed of, and these quotes show that there's nothing dirty about it. There's certainly nothing little about it, and it certainly shouldn't be kept a secret. There's a reason that we're told to put our own oxygen mask on first, and leaders are no different. They have the power to make or break a burnout culture. They have the power to show their teams that it's okay not to be okay and make sure that they set that example and lead from the top. I think there's this interesting perception of Gen Z that they can be lazy, but actually I've been speaking to a lot of Gen Zers recently that have said to me, it's actually we're not lazy, we just know what our boundaries are. It's not cool to always be on. We don't need to always say yes. And I think it's a really healthy switch that perhaps we're starting to make. But to put your own oxygen mask on first, you need to do the circle, which starts with the awareness. And actually, as we said earlier, recognizing that there's an issue is often the hardest part. Once you have that awareness, you can move into the understanding of it, why it's happened, what you can do about it. Taking ownership comes next, really, really hard to do. But once you've taken that ownership, you can move into the action, which then leads to the change. Just like in cybersecurity, there's no silver bullet for burnout either. But there are mechanisms, coping mechanisms, many that fall into the unhealthy camp, alcohol being one that was frequently touted, and actually 40% of the people that I interviewed had gone teetotal as a result of their burnout. Healthier coping mechanisms that they recommend using, taking time out, doing nothing, giving your brain that chance to retreat, clearing the fog. Set clear boundaries. It's okay to say no. You don't always have to say yes. Journaling was a really popular tool, writing down your emotions. Not everybody wants to talk their emotions through, but writing them out. And one of the leaders I spoke to that had 10 years of chronic pain, had multiple back surgeries, nothing could change. The one thing that changed was every day he started journaling, just writing down his thoughts, ripping it up, and he said that it genuinely changed his life. Like I said, cutting alcohol, but also cutting noise, cutting the noise of social media, cutting the noise of the news. I did it last night, watching the election coverage. I had to just turn it off. Talking, of course, is also a really advisable way to handle this. A problem shared is definitely a problem halved. Lots of the leaders have WhatsApp groups, CISO WhatsApp groups, leadership, people that they're in a similar position to them that they feel like they can lean on and share those experiences with. And then, of course, exercise. Or if that isn't what makes you happy and that's not your thing, that's okay. Do more of what makes you happy. But like I say, it's not a silver bullet. The full article can be found here. It's a lot more in-depth than what I've presented today. But I do want to just say thank you for listening. I recognise this isn't a typical cybersecurity presentation that you would find at a cybersecurity conference, but it does matter. And I think it's impacting the cybersecurity community and industry just as much as any other industry, if not more. So I appreciate you giving me the platform today, Brian, to talk about it. So thank you, everyone.